Is it possible, Jonathan, to defeat Hamas? Haven't we seen over the past 2 years that it just isn't possible? It depends what you see as Hamas. If you see Hamas as literally the human embodiment of Hamas on the ground and the number of humans who still wear fatigues and belong to the military operation of Hamas, then sure, maybe if you eliminate every single one of those, you've defeated Hamas. But Hamas is also an ideology. It's a belief system. And if anything, hasn't the past 2 years only inspired more people?
So Israel War Cabinet came out to vote in favor that Israel should conquer all of Gaza, including Gaza City. Well, the world, obviously, first reaction, how dare you, how can you? But think about it. We've been at war for 2 years. Our soldiers have been fighting a fierce battle. We lost close to 1,000 young, beautiful soldiers. 20 hostages are still held alive. We saw images last week of 2 of them, how terrible condition they are in. Well, let me ask you the question. Why isn't the world putting pressure on Hamas to release the hostages to end this war? Why is the world all of a sudden up in hands? How dare Israel conquer all of Gaza? You care about Gaza? You care about the Gaza civilians? What are you doing about it? Where is the pressure on Hamas to let the hostages go? The war will be over in a day. Well, please listen in to a response from Lieutenant General Jonathan Conricus, who was a former spokesman for the Israeli army during the outbreak of the October 7 war. He can explain very clearly of its implications and why the War Cabinet decided to vote in favor of moving into Gaza, but not occupying it. Israel doesn't need the headache of Gaza. Israel wants peace. Israel wants to free Gaza for its citizens that are there and to have a secure border. So listen in together with me. Listen to John Conricus, and then we can discuss it afterwards.
Gaza City. Jonathan Conricus is a former IDF spokesperson, and we're going to talk about this with him now. Morning to you, Jonathan.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So let's talk a bit about the plans that were announced by Netanyahu this week. The Israeli public seem to think it's a bad idea on the basis of these protests yesterday and opinion polling. Apparently, figures within the military think it's a bad idea. The international community certainly thinks it's a bad idea. Why would Netanyahu want to do this other than to satisfy the fanatics in his own cabinet?
So the first thing is I think we need to recognize that what's happening now is still, I believe, part of the negotiations between Israel and Hamas, the indirect negotiations. And I believe that what Israel is doing is trying to impress upon Hamas that if Hamas continues to refuse to hand over, release hostages and continues to refuse to surrender and hand over their weapons, then this is what Israel can and eventually will do. I agree on the premise of your question that definitely the international so-called community doesn't want it to happen. Parts of Israeli society are not in favor, while other parts that are less represented in media are very much in favor of it. And I would say that most of the Israeli government is in favor of it. And I would also say that there's a lot of logic in actually trying to win a war than just getting to a tie. To be clear, if the war ends as it is today, then sadly that will be a victory for Hamas. It means that they would have attacked Israel on October the 7th, and then through a series of actions and mistakes by Israel, eventually they will be able to get away with it. And I personally believe that that is not a good outcome. I agree, and I understand the concerns that many people have regarding the situation in Gaza, specifically the humanitarian situation, and of course, most importantly for me, what this would mean for Israeli hostages hostages, that are 50 Israeli hostages that are kept by Hamas. So it's definitely a very complex situation, but I wouldn't put it in black and white colors as if everybody's against it and it's just extremists who want to do it. I see myself as a middle of the road kind of Israeli. I actually want us to defeat Hamas, and I don't want them to win.
Is it possible, though? Is it possible, Jonathan, to defeat Hamas? Haven't we seen over the past 2 years that it just isn't possible? It depends what you see as Hamas. If you see Hamas as literally the human embodiment of Hamas on the ground and the number of humans who still wear fatigues and belong to the military operation of Hamas, then sure, maybe if you eliminate every single one of those, you've defeated Hamas. But Hamas is also an ideology. It's a belief system. And if anything, hasn't the past 2 years only inspired more people to subscribe to the extreme views of Hamas because of the way the Gazan people have been subjected to just the most horrendous humanitarian crisis?
Well, I would, without belittling, I wouldn't call it the most horrendous humanitarian crisis. Hardship, definitely.
Well, what could be worse? What could be worse than what the Gaza people are going through?
I'm sorry, but really to put things into perspective, and I know that we are all up in emotions about what's going on in Gaza, but if you put it into perspective, there are far worse things that have happened in history and probably are happening today.
I think you'd struggle to find more than a handful of things that could be considered anywhere near worse than what's happening in Gaza right now. Starvation is one of the most painful ways to die.
Listen, without belittling what's happening in Gaza, I think that there is tremendous media bias and fixation with what's happening in this particular conflict. And sadly, the world is full of conflict and people that are suffering for various reasons.
This is one of the most acute conflicts.
They don't get the same level.
The number of civilian casualties in this war, we're talking about something like 60,000 Palestinians now, according to the Hamas-run health ministry.
Are those civilian casualties? 60,000?
That's according to the Hamas-run health ministry.
No, even by Hamas standards, even by a lying terrorist organization, that number isn't civilian. That is the total alleged number of people that have died in Gaza, and that is, of course, not including and specifically saying how many of them were military combatants or terrorists. So if you choose to take the numbers of a terrorist organization and give them the legality of truth, then I think at least you should say that the Hamas combatives are part of that alleged number. So otherwise, you'd be misleading people into thinking that 60,000 civilians have been killed in Gaza, when in fact it's Hamas and civilians included.
Okay, we can argue about the precise number, but you don't deny that tens of thousands of civilians have been killed in Gaza, surely. Even if the figure is 30,000 or 20,000, tens of thousands of Gazan civilians have died in Gaza.
As a result of the war that Hamas started, yes, they have indeed been killed.
So then why do you dispute that this is one of the most acute conflicts anywhere in the world? Why is it media biased to be focused on that humanitarian plight?
How many times have you covered what's happening in Sueda in western Syria? Do you know that there's a siege on that area today and that around 200,000 Syrian Druze are cut off from the rest of supply of water, food, electricity? Do you know that their hospital has run out of everything and that people are dying there? Do you know that the Syrian authorities are cutting them off and refusing any aid to be let in? That's an acute humanitarian situation on the ground that, because Israel isn't directly involved and because it's not Palestinians, is getting absolute, maybe not zero, but maybe 1% of the attention. Again, I'm not being cynical here. I'm saying that, yes, people in Gaza are suffering, but I'm saying that the amount of attention that this conflict is getting and the almost automatic knee-jerk response that this gets from international media, it kind of put things out of perspective here a little bit. Yes, they're suffering in Gaza. What's the result of the suffering? The fact that they launched a war against Israel. The fact that they have Israeli hostages and that they refuse to let them up.
We're going over arguments that have been well rehearsed, but I would just put to you, Jonathan, that it wasn't the civilians, it wasn't children who were starving now that launched the war. It was Hamas.
Well, actually, it was civilians. If you want to make a point,
children did not choose to start this war.
No, children did it. That I can agree.
And children are dying.
And if you're willing to go as far...
Children are dying, and they don't deserve to die.
The responsibility for those children dying is with the people who launched the war. And it's with their parents who supported Hamas. And I think we should be recognizing that.
There hasn't been an election in Gaza for a decade or so.
Right, but the last time that they were, who was elected and who has continuously been supporting the Hamas government according
So they deserve
to most
their
Palestinian
suffering.
polls?
They deserve it, do they?
No, but I don't think that
I think
women,
that's what you're
children, and elderly.
suggesting.
I'd appreciate if you wouldn't put words in my mouth. I'm perfectly capable of saying things myself.
Okay.
I'm saying that what you are taking away from Palestinians in Gaza is agency and responsibility for their action and their choices. And I'm saying that the way that you and
I
many
don't
others
think we apply that
choose.
standard to anyone else around the world. I don't think in any other
Really?
conflict. I don't think in any other conflict. So, for example, in Syria, when there was civil war there, we didn't say, well, it's all their own fault because originally they did elect a dictator as their president who went on to rule with an iron fist. I don't think we hold civilians to that level of responsibility anywhere else in the world.
First of all, a civil war is different than a war between a state actor and a non-state actor. Here we're talking about Hamas that attacked Israel, and Israel is now fighting against Hamas. That's a different thing when you hold people accountable for the choices. And what I think is desperately missing from the conversation about what's going on in Gaza is, yes, how many people in Gaza supported Hamas? What were the sentiments in Gaza?
I think people who have been
Palestinians
born since that election, almost a decade ago, since they last had proper elections in.
It's not only about the elections,
Gaza.
and if you would allow me
I
to finish the
don't think
sentence,
children who've been born since
which
then
you obviously
deserve
don't
to
want
be
to.
suffering. You've spoken a lot, Jonathan.
Yeah,
Let's not misrepresent our interview here. You have spoken a lot, but I find it difficult.
With a lot of interruptions, yes.
Some interruptions, because it is a two-way conversation. I think most people listening would disagree with you when you say that children in some way suffer because is some way justified. Their suffering is some way justified because of the political choices of their parents.
I have not even come close to using that word, and I would again ask you professionally to represent. Don't try to paraphrase me. What I'm saying is that Hamas was the one who started this war. Hamas is accountable for the suffering in Gaza, and what Israel is doing is responding to Hamas's attack. Now, what I can agree with you 100% is that, unfortunately, Israel has still failed to achieve its objectives of defending itself and defeating Hamas. And a difference that I would like to impress upon you is that the fact that Hamas is also an ideology doesn't mean that you shouldn't fight it. It is an ideology, but last time I checked, the UK sent forces halfway around the world in order to fight the physical embodiment of that ideology, as it was in Syria and Iraq. And once they were military defeated, the UK forces went back home. It's a similar situation, only the difference here for Israel is that our civilians are in the line of fire. And if we don't deal with the threat, then the next time of the next October 7 attack, or however they will try to do it, is just a matter of time. And when people speak about the future of Gaza and will Israel take Gaza City or control, or all of the other word mincing that we're seeing now, that isn't really the point, is it? It's about either you want to live in security in your country and for people and children in Israel to be able to live safely in their homes, or you don't. If you don't, then it's okay that Hamas stays in power and we can speak about civilian suffering in Gaza and orphans and children and every other talking point that I've heard hurled at me for 2 and 3 and 5 years. But from an Israeli perspective, this is about Israelis being able to live in their homes. And since October 7, they have not been able to. Okay. And I, frankly, as an Israeli, would want for that to be reality. Now, I understand that there's hardship in Gaza, and I don't want women, children, and elderly who were not part of the fighting to suffer. But the responsibility here, and so many times that's shifted on Israel, the responsibility is on Hamas. They started the war. They could have ended it a long time ago. They hold on to our hostages. They are using the Palestinians as their human shields, and I think that's missing from coverage.
I don't think that is missing from coverage. I think there's been a lot of coverage of the part Hamas have played. Certainly, October the 7th, there was international condemnation. All of the media, in the UK at least, from what I saw, were absolutely clear in their condemnation of the actions of Hamas. The point that I pick up with you is whether civilians deserve to be suffering. And I don't really understand why you've raised this point about the fact that Hamas were elected unless you are in some way suggesting that those civilians are responsible.
What I'm saying is that the civilians in Gaza bear the consequences of Hamas. and what Hamas did on October 7th and has been doing since. And again, I know this is an unpopular point of view, but on October the 7th, about 2,000 Hamas operatives invaded into Israel and murdered and raped and burned and pillaged. And then 3,000 Palestinian civilians came into Israel and performed all kinds of atrocities in Israel. And these were run-of-the-mill, ordinary men, young men, children, and I even saw a few pictures of women, not elderly, but I saw pictures of women coming into Israel. And when they dragged Israeli hostages back into Gaza, again, you may not want me to dwell on this, but the joy, jubilation, and public excitement of Israeli hostages being drawn into Gaza was vivid. Israeli hostages have been held by Palestinian civilians in their civilian homes. They have been jailed by civilians.
Jonathan,
so you cannot tell me...
We've got to wrap it up, but I appreciate your time this morning. Look, this is a topic that people feel very strongly about. Jonathan, their former IDF spokesperson, lots of you texting in, some of you saying Jonathan's absolutely wrong, others saying, dare I even question him on it. This is always a topic, whenever we do it on LBC, that elicits very strong reaction.
Well, the reality on the ground is that if you saw on October 7, the civilians of Gaza were the ones who lined the streets, cheering on the Hamas. They are the ones who participated, who are complicit in the atrocities that happened on October 7. There's no way to sugarcoat it. The Palestinians in Gaza, they voted in the Hamas. And as the expression is, be careful what you wish for. You wanted a government like this who's a jihadist, who ruled you, who controlled you, who killed you. Now you're paying the prices for it. The deaths that happened in Gaza due to this war, the blood is on the hands of Hamas. They are the ones who started this war. Israel did not start this war. Israel did not need this war. Israel did not want this war. October 7 was a quiet Saturday morning. Everyone was celebrating the last day of the high holiday season known as Simchat Torah, the most joyous day in the Jewish calendar, when this war began. In all history, when one nation attacks another nation, they need to expect to be retaliated. Not only retaliated, the nation that you attacked, if they are stronger than you, then they're going to win. They're going to attack you and more. And in all warfare, when you conquer a country, the country is yours. You started up, you launched a war, you're the aggressor. You can't handle it, don't start it. You started this war. And the world's saying it's this disproportionate between Israeli army to the Hamas army. Yeah, absolutely. There is no proportionate response to what Hamas did to the innocent babies and beautiful, beautiful souls, the 1,200 of them that they mutilated and they raped and they burnt together and they kidnapped on October 7. There's no such thing as proportionate. What Israel has done to Gaza is to try to uproot this type of evil. What people don't understand is that Hamas militants don't dress in an army uniform. They are disguised in civilian uniforms, trying to fight a war that you don't know the difference between a soldier and a civilian. They did it specifically because they wanted to put the Palestinian civilians in arm's length. They would rather expend the Palestinians to be mistaken as militants so that they could survive. To them, life was dispensable. The children in Gaza, no matter whatever amount it was, it's all on Hamas's hands. And I hope the world realizes that. It's been a very sad 2 years for the world. It's been very sad for Israel, for all the soldiers that have fallen in this terrible war started by Hamas, for all those that were murdered on October 7, and for all the losses of life on the Gaza side, the innocent Whatever innocents there were, it's pathetically sad and heartbreaking that in the 21st century, in the year 2025, we still have to witness such war. It doesn't have to be this way. It does not have to be this way. Let the world come together, hold hands in peace, and persuade the rest of the world that Israel and the Jewish people have a right to exist. Anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism is one of the same. We're all one. We have the right to exist. Let us live and let live. Let there be peace in the Middle East. Let the Arabs live. They have ample of land to absorb any Arab who wants to leave Gaza. Why shouldn't the civilian Gazans have a right to leave? When there was a war in the Ukraine and Russia invaded Ukraine, some 800,000 Ukrainians left and they went to other countries. Why not here? Let the Gazans leave to any of the neighboring brothers' country who cares so much about them. Let them take him in, at least temporarily, get him out of harm's way. Why are they not allowed to leave? Any war zone, you're allowed to leave and just evacuate. But Hamas doesn't want them to leave because that's going to be against their propaganda, against their PR war. They want to see the Gazans suffer so that they can get the world to turn on Israel. Don't we see the truth already? So let's pray and we hope that the truth will prevail. That better times and greater times will come to the Middle East. That we'll finally finish the war, get the hostages home, and the soldiers no longer have to fight this war. And let us see better and greater times speedily in our days. Amen. God bless you. God loves you.